Hi booktube, Aaron here. Hope you're doing very well. Today I'm going to be doing the end of the year book tag, a tag originally created by Ariel Bissett, and it's I think become a bit of an annual tradition for quite a few of us now. It's a tag it's not like a wrap up for the year, but instead it's a tag for around this time, around autumn, where the end of the year is approaching and you're looking back a little at what's come so far, but you're also looking at what's still to be done this year in terms of reading. So let's jump in. So the first prompt is: are there any books that you started this year that you still need to finish? And luckily, I don't have any books like this. I've had a few projects over the year, but I've done a good job of actually finishing them. And although there are a few books that I have planned for later on in the year, there's nothing ongoing at the moment that I don't need to finish. So that's, yeah, pretty good. Number 2, do you have an autumnal book to transition to the end of the year? I don't really always have one particular book that I go back to, but I have found that actually there was one book that I was really in the mood for, and actually it did do a good job of getting me into an autumnal mood, or maybe more accurately, reading this book expressed the autumnal mood I was already feeling as the weather's been changing and the leaves on the trees have been changing as well. And that's Goblin Market by Christina Rossetti, particularly the title poem, Goblin Market, but there's some other poems in here that have been really, really good. And just going back to one in particular, there's one that I really loved called Dreamland, which sounds really lovely and dreamy, and then it turns out to be about a dead person. But that had a lovely sort of ethereal, sort of autumnal feel to it, as do a couple of others in here. So this has actually been a great little book for this time of year. Number 3, is there a new release that you're still waiting for? And there isn't for me. I'm not always really paying that much attention for new releases, and also I'm not planning to buy any books until March. I've set myself a bit of a challenge, so even if there was, I wouldn't be buying it or reading it before the end of the year anyway. Number 4 is what are 3 books you want to read before the end of the year? There are a number of books I'd like to get to, but here are 3 of them that that I'm not going to be reading for any particular event, for any buddy read or anything like that. These are just 3 books that have caught my attention that I would like to get to. First up is Illuminations by Arthur Rimbaud, translated by John Ashbery. I was reading some of John Ashbery's poetry a couple of months ago, and although I enjoy Rimbaud, I'd also just like to go back to Ashbery as well, so it's a fun way of doing that. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, this is quite short, and it's a parallel translation, so we've got the French and the English there. And then this is one I've got sort of planned to read around Christmas time. It's the Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I've never read anything by Salinger, so I thought I'd start here. If I enjoy it, I will go on and read some more Salinger. And then the other, a poet I've been meaning to get to for about half of the year, really, Elizabeth Jennings, who I quite enjoy. So there are 3 books, and actually the spines of these 3 all look quite nice together. It's quite a nice autumnal sort of palette that we've got there with those 3 books. And then number 5 is there a book that could still shock you and become your favourite book of the year? And I don't think there's a book that I have planned for later this year that could become a new favourite. I was looking back at some I've already read, and there are a few that are sort of potentials. So there are a couple of poetry books that I've really loved and have just been ideal poetry experiences, I suppose is how I would put them. So one of the first books I read this year was Alphabet by Inga Christiansen. Really lovely. I really enjoyed this. And a few months ago I read Nobody by Alice Oswald, one of my favourite all-time poets. And so those are both 2 great poetry books that have really they felt like they added a certain depth to the year's reading. But so far, my favourite all-time reading experience of the year, and maybe of the decade, I'm not sure, was Austerlitz by W.G. Sebald. And so so far I think this is the one to beat, and so we'll just wait and see. We've got a few more months, so maybe something will come up that I much prefer. We'll see what happens. And then the very last prompt then is, have you started making plans for next year? And I have a few tentative plans that really I've just written down things that I'm kind of in the mood for, not just in this moment, but sort of looking back over the last few months, or in some cases over the last year or 2, sort of looking in what kind of direction my reading's been going, and where generally I feel like I'll be heading towards, certain things I might be returning to, things like that. So first up we've got Umberto Eco, an author that, at least for the foreseeable future, I think I want to try and read 1 book by him every year. I really enjoy him. I have a number of unread books by him. The one grabbing my attention the most at the moment is The Prague Cemetery, his sort of penultimate book, I believe, or his penultimate novel at least. So this might be one I get to quite soon in the new year. But I'd also quite like to reread The Name of the Rose. Quite soon after reading The Name of the Rose, I knew that I wanted to reread it. So that's another one I'm fairly certain I'd quite like to get to at some point next year. And before I destroy everything, short stories is something else I want to make a bit more of a priority next year. I've got this the collected shorter fiction of Tolstoy here in 2 volumes. I bought this right at the beginning of this year, so I might start dipping into it from now, and then just see how long it takes. But I think generally with non-fiction and things like that, and with maybe essays and things, I want to get better at just dipping in and not necessarily reading it systematically, or even if I'm keeping a bookmark and going through, I'm not thinking of it as a book I'm constantly reading. I will just read the next story, the next essay, or whatever it might be, and it'll take as long as it takes. I might read other books in the meantime, but just to dip in and have a change of pace. And so these collected shorter fictions by Tolstoy will be one way of doing that. There are a few more authors that I've picked up. In terms of rereading, I'd love to reread the collected fictions of Borges next year, or maybe even before the end of the year. I'm not sure. There's part of me that would just want to do a deep dive and make this the only fiction I read for a certain month, and just spend a whole month with Borges and no one else. That might be something that I'll do. There's this book of a little sort of compilation volume by the Everyman's Library. It's stories of books and libraries, and it's got essays and short stories around the theme of libraries and books and book collections and things like that. And I've already read the first story in here, so I'll, again, with that sort of methodology of dipping in, that'll be another one I'd gravitate towards. And then there's Edgar Allan Poe, the complete stories. Again, there's no reason why I can't start now and just read a random story every now and then. And in the same vein, we've got the collected stories of Ernest Hemingway as well. This could really use a bit of a clean up. I might give this a wipe down before I put it back on the shelf. Whoever owned it before me just used this as a placemat, apparently. So yeah, there are a few sort of collected volumes of sort of short fiction, shorter pieces that I'd quite like to get to and make a kind of loose project out of over the course of the next year. Another thing I'm trying to get better at, and I'd like to make a larger staple of my reading habits next year, would be to use my e-reader more, so to use my Kindle more. I've read about 7 books on my Kindle this year, which is just a sort of fraction really of my sort of general reading diet. It's still 7 books, it's still very good, but I'd like to use it more. There have been periods of 2 or 3 months where this has just been sat just waiting for me to use it, and I've just finished reading a book on it, and I was almost distracted from the reading because of how much I was enjoying reading on it and just sort of relishing how fun it was to read on it. So I'd really like to make it more of my a bigger part of my reading life. And then finally, just 2 authors I've been meaning to get to for a long time. Dan Simmons, this is Hyperion. I think Sean D. Standfast is going to be doing like a big read-along, group read kind of thing of Hyperion next year. So I'm going to try and join in with that and read that with them. And another author who I've been meaning to get to for a very, very long time is Elizabeth von Armin. And this is The Enchanted April, which I've heard is very good, but I just keep forgetting about it. And so it's one I'd like to make a priority. It sounds like it's quite a funny book. And to be honest, there's like most of the things I read published by Virago, like very little of it I find boring or repetitive or just sort of run of the mill. Quite often they're books that stand out to me, so I'd quite like to get to von Armin and see if she lives up to her reputation. And that's it. So that's my end of the year book tag for 2024. It's quite crazy how quickly the year's gone by. But I haven't written down any names for people to tag, and so I'll leave it open. So if you'd like to do this, if you I don't know, if you haven't been tagged yet, then yeah, give it a go. And if you don't have a channel, but you want to sort of let us know what you've been reading so far this year, what your favourites have been, what your plans for next year are, things like that, then feel free to share that in the comments as well. But for now, Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.